Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. Today I'm going to talk about something that is relevant to current times, which I think all of us have been talking about for weeks now, but it just doesn't seem like it's enough. You know, there just is so much going on in the world that I feel like it's good to keep addressing things that occur to us that need addressing. And as some of you who have listened to our Dharma talks, you might find that we talk about the same thing over and over again. But what happens with that is each one of us brings our own expression and our own interpretation of what we feel would be good to talk about and what might help the world out. So that's my intention here. So what I'm going to talk about is balancing and disturbing news. Okay? And the thing that cropped up is that there is a lot going on in the world that is difficult to hear. And what I'm not going to talk about is that you can go listen to the bad news and then turn around and find lots of good news to listen to. You know, that really is helpful. And I do that sometimes just to find out what is going on, that, you know, how people are helping each other out. And I feel like there's a lot more that we can listen to or in the Dharma that might help us out on a deeper level or a more thorough or satisfying way. And I'm going to touch on a few points about that today. So, what do we do when we don't want to hear more bad news? One thing I have found that's very effective is that I'm learning how to offer myself loving kindness. Sometimes I just feel like I've listened to too much bad news, and it affects me in a way that it starts to disturb me in a very deep way. And that's not what I want to allow to happen. And I find if I offer myself loving kindness, that I can balance the news that I feel like it's important as a responsible spiritual adult to pay attention to the news. And I find that sometimes I'm upset and I'm listening to news that is upsetting, and I find that it's really hard to offer myself loving kindness. You know, I have to kind of figure out how to do that. It's not something that I can just, you know, press a button or turn on a faucet. It's not an easy thing for me to do, and I'm learning how to cultivate that skill, is the way I look at it. So how do you do that when you feel outraged, despairing, or confused? One thing that I have found is if I can review my life, I can think of some time or another or an experience when somebody offered me loving kindness. And what I came up with this time to offer, you know, as an example is I was in Berlin, Germany, once upon a time. You know, I was a young adult and decided that I wanted to find something in the city, and I don't remember what it was, but I was walking around looking for something. I don't know, maybe it was just taking a walk, probably that's what it was, but I got lost. I didn't know the language, and I was a very shy person at that time, and I really got confused, and I got scared. And I was really disturbed. You know, I was in a big city, international. I did not know the language. I didn't know where I was. I had to get back to the place that I was staying at. I knew that much. Somebody walked up to me, looked at me, and said, "Do you need some help?" And I said, "Yes." And the person spoke really good English. I was so delighted and grateful. And he just told me what I needed to know. I knew enough about where I needed to go that he said, all you have to do is run it out. And I found my way quite easily back to my place. something about that has stayed with me. This was when I was in my 20s, so it was a long time ago. That it was that act of loving kindness. You know, he didn't need to do that, but he saw somebody, a stranger, me, and he walked up to me and said, "Do you need some help?" You know, it was just, the timing was perfect, and it helped me out. Now, with that is a memory, obviously, because I remember it. And it's something that I experienced, and I can tap into that, if you know what I mean. Just the memory of it was good. And I can tap into that feeling that I had when that person helped me out. And I feel like that's a beginning to offer. That person's help actually was something that I internalized, and now I can use that as something, that feeling of being helped, as loving kindness for myself, if that makes sense. I can use it as a skill to offer myself loving kindness. So I find that very helpful when I look at the bad news, is that it's somehow helpful for me to have a sense of well-being. Okay, the balance. So that's part of the balancing of listening to disturbing news. Another thing that occurred to me is the news is kind of, what do you call it? It's not addictive, but there's so much going on that and every day it seems like we need to pay attention to the news, whether it's watching where a wildfire is going, or, you know, it's just, or something else. You know, it just seems like there's a lot. And I realize, you know, I choose to watch the news or listen to the news. And I think maybe I don't have to be so much controlled by the news, but can choose when I want to listen to the news. Like, in other words, when I'm more settled and well balanced. And I do that, and it helps a lot. Take a deep breath and say, okay, now I'm ready to look at the news. And it actually does help. And I also realize that no matter what the conditions are, and this would be for people that haven't been practicing Buddhism for a very long time, and I think for all of us is to realize that no matter what conditions are, we can always practice the precepts. Always, always. You know, that's one of those words you're not supposed to say, but it's true. It's always a refuge. And I wanted to read the precepts for those of you who don't know what they are. I'm going to read the 10 precepts, and just as a way to give you all that might be watching this now or at a later date, so that you give you an idea of what we as Buddhist monks here follow very seriously as guidelines for what to do. So I'm going to read the 10 great precepts in a slightly different way than what we're used to, but I think it's fine. I will do my best to live in such a way that I will not kill. I will do my best to live in a way, in such a way that I do not steal. I will do my best to live in a way that I will not misuse sexuality or covet. I will do my best to live in such a way that I will not say that which is untrue. I will do my best to live in such a way that I will not sell the wine of delusion. I will do my best to live in such a way that I will not speak against others. I will do my best to live in such a way that I will not be proud of myself and devalue others. I will do my best to live in such a way that I will not be miserly in giving either Dharma or wealth. I will do my best to live in such a way that I will not be angry. I will do my best to not debase the 3 treasures. And I wanted to mention to you all that are watching this, listening to this with the YouTube, that you can find really good explanations that some of our monks have done in recent times about the precepts that might help you flush out what I'm just listed. In other words, explain what they are. So I'm going to tell you how to do that. You can go to YouTube and then look at, search for Shasta Abbey Dharma Talks. So it's Shasta Abbey Dharma Talks on YouTube. Click on Playlists and then go to Introduction to Serene Reflection Buddhism. And that will give you a chance to see what it is that we use here as guidelines for how to act, how to learn how to act, and how to help others as well. Another thought that came to my mind about balancing and disturbing news is to look at ourselves. And I'd like to suggest that this might be a good time that we could look at our moral values and see if we feel like they're threatened and how that might be so. And I ask for us to focus on what is it that's useful in terms of moral values, and what is it that's important, or what is it that's worthwhile. And I think it's a good time to review those things because there's a lot going on that is incomprehensible, confusing, hard to understand, hard to know what the future is, etc., and so on. It goes on. And it kind of leaves us in our cages are being rattled, if that makes any sense. And it just is a good time to review these things, to bring some life into them. Maybe there's some things that we just, no longer need to do, things that we have, attitudes that we brought to a certain value that just is not that great anymore because it doesn't work. Or it's something we did when we were a teenager, 16 years old or something that was, too long ago. But there are times when we can draw on these values. We do it anyway, without our even knowing it. And that's what we do when we make judgments about certain things. And this might be just a good time to review that. And here's a question for all of us. Can we be honest and answer the following question? Do we have biases that predetermine our opinions? That's a good one. And I think it might be helpful to look at that and to see what it is we bring to a certain situation, i.e. bad news. And I ask, are these biases something that are, are they useful? Are they important? Or are they worthwhile? And to be honest with ourselves and see if we come up with a yes or a no or whatever. I'm not suggesting anything for yourselves. It's something that we all have to do individually and on our own. Like if we see on the news about a person that we don't like, do our automatic biases kick in immediately? I'm going to offer that up. Besides just looking at them, it might be time to renew them, bring some new life into them, and bring them up to the current time. To commit to them in a new way. And also to remember that we have the precepts as our guide. And this is what we do again as Buddhist monks. Now I want to move on to a story that I found that was very inspiring. So I'm going to start. It was an article in a magazine. Let's see here. And the title of the article was called On Finding Solace and Solidarity in a Broken-Hearted World. And the person writes that her beliefs have been crumbled when she looks at them in relation to current world conditions. For one example is the American ethos that says, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's something she's heard, and she just said, she's questioning that. She said, she said, why should I do that when there are a lot of real life stories where there's inequality in the world? What good is it going to be for me to pull myself up by my bootstraps? Which means to me, when you say that, it says like grow up and just learn to live with disagreeable situations, you know. That's what, for me anyway, pulling up by your bootstraps. So it doesn't really help anybody else out. A second belief that she's had crumble is the phrase justice for all. She said, how can I believe something like that when I look around and there's a lot of real life stories where justice is not being for all? In fact, there's a lot of injustice. The author felt brokenhearted by what she knew and she saw. She then says that upsetting current conditions that are prevalent has her attention. In other words, things are so bad and so disturbing to her that it's got her attention, right? You know, finally. It takes us a while to realize that things are not great, but once we do, our attention's on it. Maybe that's why we watch so much news. I don't know, but it's there. And she said, and that paying attention can be devastating. Very honest person, which is true. It can be. She also writes that she wasn't alone with her broken-hearted thoughts and feelings. As she found out, there were many people who also shared her thoughts and feelings. She had a community to help her. She writes, despite the challenges of social distancing, I believe there remains no better antidote to despair and hopelessness than finding other people who feel as I do and working alongside them to fix what is breaking our hearts. And to help her heal her own heart, she has her way of doing things. This is what she writes. First, I let myself feel it all, the grief. I surrender to the grief. Her response can then be feelings of a broken heart. But maybe, she writes, but maybe what the world needs is more broken-hearted people. Next, I look around and ask myself, who else is emotionally destroyed by the state of the world? And what are they doing? What help are they offering? And then she says, how can I help? And that begins her journey to start engaging herself with others. With these questions and actions, she says, soon enough, I become a helper too. Working alongside other broken-hearted people is the most healing practice I know. Now, this person started on her journey not so long ago, because she's part of what she would call a Gen Z person. So she was Generation Z, and that means she was born somewhere between 1997 and 2010. I looked it up. In other words, she's 22 years old. And she's taken this on. She decided at her college that she needed to find a way to fix her broken heart. She wore a big sign, said, "My heart is broken, is yours." And she went out into the crowd of college students. And on her arm, she, I find this endearing, she took a Mart's permanent pen marker and wrote it on her arm, the people in her life that had helped her out, because she was scared to do this. But from her doing that, a lot of people would come up and said, "My heart's broken too. What can we do about it?" And so this has been her life, and now she's doing something very effective with helping out with global change and helping other people. I find her advice very comforting in a way that is very realistic and something that I pay attention to. And I have to say, yay. Here she is, like 50 years younger than I am, a lot, half a century, and she's got things to say that I find actually will help the world out, and something that we can also follow her advice. So, on reflecting upon very serious problems we have these days, like wildfires, climate change, pandemic, political unrest, systemic racism, unemployment, etc., can anything be done to help our world, our people, our earth? I say yes, there is. One thing to do is to talk to people with the attitude of curiosity about the other person, not with your biases, but curious about what they're going to say. Ask them, we do have problems these days, pandemic, etc., and they are overwhelming. What do you think can be done about them? In other words, not come to people talking with a preconceived idea, but more with an open mind. I think it's really good that we don't isolate ourselves today in these times. It doesn't really do us a lot of good, because our minds when we're alone too much, our minds just start spinning our own story, and I don't know that that can be all that helpful. Talking with others helps us to connect so we don't feel so alone and overburdened by world's problems. Maybe there is something you can do to help, or we can all do to help. Something on a small scale, something doable. It will help us to move in a direction of helping, of making our world a worthwhile place to live. And I want to end with a poem or a saying from the Shobogenzo that Dogen writes that I find helpful. It's on a chapter on the Buddha nature. And what he says is this: you should investigate thoroughly through your Buddhist practice that each and every seed, along with each and every flower and fruit, is the product of an honest and sincere heart. There are seeds within fruit, and even though the seeds are not visible, they become trees thick with branches thick and small. I'll read that again. You should investigate thoroughly through your Buddhist practice that each and every seed, along with each and every flower and fruit, is the product of an honest and sincere heart. There are seeds within fruit, and even though the seeds are not visible, they become trees thick with branches thick and small. Thank you.